everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are very excited to be back for another consultation masterclass. So you will see myself here, Lou, with Dario right beside me. Now, hopefully you're all becoming very familiar with Dario on this platform, because this is class number 3 of our 8-week consultation masterclass. So just before we get started, if you could please let us know in the comments where you are tuning in from. We would love to hear from you. And if you do have any questions as we do go through this session, please pop them in and I'll keep an eye on that. So if you see me with my eyes down, I'll be checking all your comments to ask Dario throughout this live. Now, if you have missed any of the previous consultation masterclasses we have done, you can find them on Facebook or IGTV. They have all been recorded, so definitely take the time to catch up on those ones. But today is all about ego. So very excited to get stuck into this juicy live that we've got today. Now, I think that's my intro, Dario. It's over to you. So I'll let Dario take over and take the reins from here, and I will be on the sidelines watching for all your questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Lou. And thank you, everyone. The feedback we're receiving, I know personally, our guests and clients private messaging me and thanking me, particularly last week's session, which was great. And so which leads us to ego this week. And I feel that our industry, or anyone that's creative, is affected by it. I mean, we've all got an ego, and I think most people get offended by the word ego. And I think if you surrender to it and you're more present with it, then you can really embrace it versus be led by fear. And I think when you're leading by fear with ego, it can bring out the worst in humanity in terms of how we react, whether it be through someone's success or whether it be through a missed opportunity, that whole defense mechanism that comes up that really pushes people away from us. And so what throughout the course of my 31 years, I've gone back and done autopsies when things have really not gone quite well or worked out as planned, particularly when I was doing photo shoots, to really understand, well, was that a me thing or a we thing? And, I just think anyone that's putting themselves out there is quite vulnerable. And when you can manage your own ego, it is what it is, and just walking away from people that are, I find in a salon space, and this is my space behind me, part of our salon, is that I find that, even with clients, they can be quite insulting because they're talking from a place of hurt, pain, or ego. And I just don't buy into it anymore. And because I'm very present and I realize that person's leading from smallness or hurt. And I generally have a lot more empathy and not attaching myself to it. I don't absorb it. I observe it. And so I've worked out a whole lot of techniques. And when I started looking into Carl Jung, the psychologist, and understanding, his research in ego, I was really surprised by just how it resonates in today's world. And he's no longer with us, and his work's been around for many, many years. And I just thought, wow, it's like he's written it for today's society, in the social media that the world we're living in. And so I really wanted to create today's session on a health check on our ego. When you've got a second, we'll get the presentation up. So I can't wait to get through it. But I'm very passionate about this because in my 20s, we're walking through life quite fearlessly, and I had a huge ego. If someone was to tell me that I was wrong, or if a client was to say they didn't like something, we would find 10 reasons why we were right and why the client was wrong. And I'll give you a classic example. I work with one of the most amazing English cutters. Like, he was an amazing hairdresser. And he would have 3 redos a week because clients would be coming in saying, I don't like my hair. And he would be just blaming whatever reasons why that client had a problem with, there was a problem with that client, other than the fact that he didn't understand that client. So I think in a world that we want to build as much and grow in our networking in terms of our capacity to grow and attract more like-minded people, is that, do we want to push people away, or do we want to bring people to us? And I think in the world that we're living through right now, I think it's about making us as approachable and as fearless as possible for clients to actually feel comfortable about giving us feedback, and whether it be feedback directed that's constructive or be the client just transferring something onto us, but not to attach ourselves to it. And that's really where ego gets involved, because we make it real. So it's, before we get into this, I think this is very important. It's a bit like someone throwing a throwaway comment, and it could be something like about what you're wearing, or it could be something that you've said, and it's not really real unless we attach ourselves to it and make it real, and then it becomes a thing, and then it becomes we all of a sudden we're moving from a conversation now into potential threat or a potential argument, and that's because we chose to see it as a threat. And I think when you look at life, I kind of get it if someone was in the room and you know, potentially threatening your life to react, and or potentially threatening your safety. But we do the same with words, and I think people really need to wake up to the fact that they're just words, unless we make it we highlight it, or perhaps make it a focus, rather just ignoring it and letting it go through. And I think when I see arguments and I think, wow, that person's really grabbing onto what they've just said, versus just letting it go, going, that's a throwaway comment. And
Easier said than done.
yeah, it is. But that's why it's an hourly practice. It's a daily practice. It's a minutely practice. And I think every time someone's thrown something at me, or I've heard feedback come back directly, that, you know, I've heard people say about me, you know, as I've gotten older, it's really not that, it doesn't stick. It becomes more Teflon, because I've got a greater sense of self now. But when you're in your 20s and you're discovering life and working it all out, everyone's opinion matters. And that's the sad part about youth, is because we're seeking approval. And I think this is where this presentation will really help, particularly those that are very passionate and very much into, you know, people liking their work. And I realized early on in my career, it wasn't about being liked, it was about being respected. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah. So if we can get into the presentation, that'd be great, because you've got the power of the clicker. So yeah. So
this slide.
Yeah, thank you. So all these things on the screen really represent what ego, you know, kind of means to most of us. You know, attachment, beliefs, memories, emotions, feelings, traits, knowledge, our conduct, who I am, or people who I think, or what I perceive. People assume of, you know, how you're coming across. And there's just so much time wasting in all of this, because for me, if we're living in a very present life, you know, all of this really doesn't matter, because what comes out of our mouth is really contributing to our future. And I think when some people are living in the past. I heard a really great thing last night when I was teaching about a hairdresser talking about another hairdresser. And she wasn't being disrespectful, but she was saying, really, it was cutting. It was that truthful. She was saying, you know, this hairdresser is, you know, unfortunately living in the past, and talking about, all they're doing is just talking about what they've done and what they've achieved. But that was 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And that's really sad. And she kept on referring to the person saying, I did this, I did that. And that's a very egoic statement. And so that's why I try to use the word we a lot. And, you know, I've been in situations where people say, oh, how many are you in your company? And it's like, oh no, it's just me doing the teaching. But I just try not to say I, because I don't like an I conversation. I like a we conversation. And I really like, I really like engagement. So that's where I learned to coexist with my clients and it's a relationship, and relationships aren't always great. It's, you know, you might hear something you don't want to hear, and it is what it is. And I thank people for their feedback. If I feel like it's the intention's right. If I feel like someone's shooting from the sidelines and it's just, you know, transferring their pain onto whether it be myself or someone I know, you know, that's why we have a button called delete. You know, you can just delete that comment, and we don't have to respond. because then we become caught up into that person's pain. And I
Mm.
think we've got to be really mindful of the life, particularly in salons and beauty spaces, of the type of life we want to lead. And it is about leading. Yeah, every day, every minute, it's about reminding yourself, um, do I want more mindfulness within my day? And that takes a lot of energy. But the result of that gives us so much more pleasure, because we're attracting like-minded people that want the same. They want to feel safe in our space. They want to feel really cared for. Versus in the 80s, when I started hairdressing, it was about the hairdresser with the magic wand and dictating to clients what to have. We're now in the information age, and clients are actually quite educated. So we'll go on to the next slide. This is where it gets really exciting. Okay, so we talk about persona. So if we think about hairdressers, we're very much in this space. It's our persona of what people think of us. And I think we can get really lost in this space, whether it be our salon, whether it be our social media, or whether it be winning awards or entering awards. So I worked out, when we look at an objective world and a subjective world. So when a client comes in and a client says, I didn't like my color last time, or I didn't like this treatment that I had, I don't lean away from it. I lean into it and I ask my guests, well, what was it? I go a little bit deeper and I say, what was it that you specifically didn't like? And if she says it was too red, I go, okay, great, thank you. And I said, well, if we didn't do red this time, would you be happy? And I put it back on the onus of the client to find out what would make her happy, versus what I see in hairdressing is a lot of anxiety of people pleasing. So the hairdresser starts to do the dancing hands. And I'm really describing myself as a young hairdresser, is that, you start touching their hair a lot.
Right.
And,
yeah.
Yeah. And I don't touch my guest's hair until I finish the consultation. Because you touch it, you own it. And the consultation for me is very much an interview. I'm interviewing, does this feel right today? Does this feel like it's going to be a great relationship? I'm not into transactions. I'm into long-term relationships. So I like to invest a lot of myself. And I like in return my guests to be able to reciprocate that, for it to be meaningful. And so if my guest said, you cut my hair way too short last time, and sometimes guests get really engaged, like they sit around and they go, oh, you cut it way too short last time. And then there's a little bit of pain and suffering coming up to the top that we spoke about in our last session. And so all I say to them, okay, so if we don't cut any length off today, will you be happy? And we work on shape, a slimming technique. Would you be open to that? So we can easily pivot, because it's about being objective, and objective is about being unbiased. It's actually about being really honest. There's no personal feelings. But where I find hairdressing is it becomes very subjective, where we can redirect it to the client saying, and we can get defensive.
Yeah.
Because we say, oh no, I didn't say that, or I didn't mean that. And then we end up in a gray area. And this is why I absolutely love what Timely is doing, because when I spoke early on with our good friend Georgie at Timely about what I felt was a really great solution, was to actually put an accountability process to both you and the client. I need to understand what she understands, and she needs to understand what I understand. And thanks to you guys at Timely, you've developed exactly that. It's a tool that helps it become more objective and not subjective. Because I find that so many of us can tell ourselves what we want to hear versus what has happened. And I think, you can get hired and fired every hour of your day by your client.
Yeah.
They have a choice. And I think sometimes we live in this world, we can live in this bubble that we can just call it a rude client, and we can call her as a challenging client. But I always, the humility that I always remind myself in terms of being grateful for the people in my life is that every client supporting our lifestyle mortgage, every client supporting putting food on our table, as simple as that. And so I don't mind difficult clients. I really don't mind. If their intention is to articulate, what they've got in their head out, no problem at all. But as we spoke last week, it's different if last session, it's different if a guest is intentionally wanting to be rude. So my thing is be objective all the time with your guests, and be unbiased when you're talking. And if you've got it wrong, just simply open your palms up and say, we got it wrong. And we're now going to make...
In your seat. They are actually back in your seat.
That's right. And I think that's what most people don't understand. If you're a hairdresser and you're applying color at the basin or the spa, whatever you want to call it, and the color's quite not taken because the hair's porous, all you have to do is lean forward in front of your guest and speak in a very gentle tone, like you're in a spa, and say, look, your hair is really thirsty today. And so we're going to have to put another application to get the dream color or the dream tone that we're aiming for. Okay. No extra cost, just a little bit more time. And so it's leaning in with really solution-based words that are actually filling the client up with support, love.
Rather than making them worried or...
Yeah, because most clients are savvy to how long things take. And clients might say to you, I don't have the time. You go, look, we can forego the big blow dry because that's, you know, we can spend more time on the color. You're going to walk out with dry hair, but the priority is getting a color that's going to be sustainable for 6 to 8 weeks. Yes. So if we're subjective, we'll be making excuses for why it didn't work. But if we're objective, we can be going in and really finite with our conversation. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we'll go to the next slide.
Awesome.
Okay. So our ego is our exterior presenting you to the world with your outer mask. Okay. Love the emoji. Meaning the real me is hidden behind the mask. And this is what I see in hairdressing. And I go to hairdressing awards, and I'm not a big fan of going to the awards because everyone's got their mask on. And I do have some really beautiful friends in hairdressing, but there are some people that are just not my people, as you know, it works both ways. But so ego for me doesn't mean you've got a fat head, because people often get offended. It's our internal eye and center of our personality that organizes what we perceive. And we're not that sophisticated, our brains, to really understand what's going on or what we're perceiving in real time, because our brains are quite distracted with processing. So the body generally believes what the mind's thinking. For example, a hurt feeling is ego. So if you say to someone, you know, you've got a huge ego, which I don't recommend saying, by the way, but if you said, so go home tonight and tell your partners you've got a huge ego. No, I wouldn't recommend that. That movie will not end well. So the idea is that if someone says you've got a huge ego and you respond to it, well, that's confirmation, right? That your ego is active.
It's speaking, it's responding, yes.
Yeah, because you're getting defensive. And so in summary, ego is a fictitious fantasy and a sense of self, and ultimately a loss of self. Because I believe ego only comes out when we're not in control.
And disconnected from that inner, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And for me, when I say control, what I mean by is being present. I don't mean by controlling other people. Because for me, it's about controlling yourself. Yeah. Because I always say, is this a me thing or is this a we thing? Because sometimes, most of the times, it's not a me thing. The client's just throwing away her trash in terms of just saying stuff. It's getting it out. And sometimes we attach ourselves to something and we make it something, and next thing you know, it's on the news in our head. It's latest headlines, and there's no perceived there's no perceived attack going on. Yeah. And I think, you know, we're just so in our own head and trying to be right. And I don't care if I'm not right. I really don't. I like to, you know, it's not about grinding it out and making sure you're right. It's about, for me, I've got to feel right, not be right. Yeah. And I think sometimes when we're trying to be right, we just hammer it away and we're pushing people away from us. And I think in the world of business and the economics of business is that the client's got to feel right. Yeah. Not belittled or told that, you know, that's what you said. And again, I bring it back to the consult app and this video that we've just shot recently, which will be out very soon, which is amazing. You know, when you're showing your guest the before and after, this is where we started the journey and this is where we finished the journey today. There's evidence in front of her that you've actually transformed her quite a lot. Yeah. So it's very objective. It's evidence-based. When you actually show the guest what she's written down as the brief, and 3 hours later, when you're finishing, she's assuming that you were going to go darker, but she's written in the brief that she wanted to go lighter, opposite. Yeah. So, you know, because sometimes what we assume and what we have said are two different things, because we're living in a busy world.
Yeah.
So busy. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So then we have our shadow ego, which is, the shadow is part of our unconscious mind. So it's more about how we behave, like without really understand. Like, you know, when one of your friends say, you really do this a lot, and you're like, do I?
And you don't quite realize.
Yeah, and that's really ultimately our shadow. So we lose clarity on situations and produce judgment. And so when I find I'm being judgmental about things, and judgment really, I've learned, judgment's there for the brain not to work hard. So the brain just gets a snapshot and tells the body what's going on because it doesn't want to work hard. So it's easily just label
the situation.
Yeah, and it's just a really lazy way of moving through life. And so when I find myself, if I'm a little bit judgmental, I know I need some self-kindness time. And so I really need to start getting more connected within myself. So whether it be doing something that I really love, or spending time with my mom, or spending time with my daughters on a good day when they're in a good mood. But a lot of planets have to line up. Or just simply going to Hyde Park in Sydney on a good day and sitting in the grass and reading a good book and not being disturbed, like a real day for yourself, or even an hour.
A self-discovery on the fact that those two were so closely related.
Yeah.
You know, needing to be kind of inside to be kind of outwards as well, and be less judgmental.
Yeah.
And I guess you're less judgmental on yourself.
Yes, that's exactly it. Because, you know, we're so hard on ourselves, you know, like we can be so self-critical and really almost mean to ourselves with what we're saying. And I think if you're walking around, and I've been through all of this, you know, because I've been around for a while in hair, and, you know, you could be, I used to get really quite passive aggressive on shoots because I would be pushing myself for the weeks leading up to a big campaign, or days.
Yeah.
And I would not have much sleep the night before, which is crazy. Because, you know, your monkey mind's going off. And then you get to the shoot and I'll be almost really aggressive to push myself to get to that level. And I realized that I didn't need to, because, you know, I'm sure I was probably not the most pleasant to be around. Just put my headphones on and just do hair and not talk to anyone. And that's just not functional. It's not functional. So, you know, when I have clients coming in that I feel are being a bit judgmental, it says more about her than me.
Do you have some examples on how some examples on how that shadow comes out in people? What some like common examples of how, let's say, someone's not quite aware of how of how that's being brought out? Obviously the fact that if someone is super judgmental, that would be that shadow speaking.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when I find that people are just being unconscious about what they're saying, not conscious, and you can really tell when it's just that it's a language that's just really superficial.
Okay.
And it leads to being judgmental about people. And I was in a conversation recently, I was a witness of a conversation that was very judgmental. And I said to both these celebrities, I feel like I'm in a movie. It's like a reality. And they didn't get it. I said, I really feel like I'm in a reality TV show, not a movie. And they just laughed. And I went,
like, where are you in there?
Yeah. But it wasn't funny. They were talking about stuff that was about someone. And I exited from it. And I'm very careful about who I bring around me and who I spend time with, because I don't want to be around that. I really don't. I just want to be around people that help me feel nurtured, because that's my intention for them.
Yeah.
Really love that nurturing, nourished feeling that you feel soulful when you're around that. And I'm very lucky. Even today, I spent 3.5 hours today with Australia's best architect. And he is one of the most humble human beings and just a very kind person. And I think if we can lead from more kindness and self-awareness, self-reflection in a positive way, not a critical or judgmental way, then, you know, we shrink the shadow because we're aware that it's, you know, and then when I say monkey mind, we can tell ourselves what we want to hear, because sometimes we can be quite destructive as being creative people. So Ultimately, the shadow becomes our filter to our reality. And if you think it, it must be true. And that's where I go monkey mind.
Mm.
You know,
I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying around, and it really resonates with me around what's happening internally, your perception that you are putting out on the world is what your reality is going
yes,
to be. And if that is less judgment and more kindness, you're the one that's feeling that. That is happening inside your mind and inside your thoughts, and you are the one that feels that. So yeah, it makes sense.
so that ultimately, the more you can shine a light on awareness, the more your ego shadow will shrink.
Mm-hmm.
And I do this great technique, by the way, where I wiggle my toes. It's a great technique. I probably do it over about 1,000 times a day. So every time I feel like I'm mind wandering,
Yeah.
I wiggle my toes, and it brings me back into the sensation of feeling my toes in my body.
Pointed focus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because if
Awesome.
I can feel my toes, I can feel the sensation in my body, and it reminds me to feel,
Yeah.
and reminds me to be here right now. It reminds me to be and appreciate being present and enjoying the company.
Brings you back to now for sure. That
Yeah.
little wiggle of the toes, nice.
Yeah. And I love it. I mean, it's like a movie.
Yeah, we've got a few tools now. We're
Yeah.
getting a good toolkit from you.
Yeah. Thank
Last
you.
week, the tongue at the back of your
Yes.
teeth,
Yes.
and this week the wiggle of the toes to bring yourself back to being present. Love
Yes. All right. We'll go to the next slide.
it. Awesome.
Okay. So this is not up there to feel good about it, this photo, but this is Lindsay Lohan, 2 different stages of her life.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the shadow, the photo on the left of your screen is obviously when she was younger and dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And I often find clients and we come in with our shadow,
Mm-hmm.
our distorted reality. So our persona of what we think we look like.
Mm-hmm.
When clients show me photos of what they want to look like. So say, for instance, if you've got a car that is a 40-year-old car,
Mm-hmm.
in your mind, it might feel like a Porsche when you're watching it.
Yep.
But ultimately,
That item somewhere.
but ultimately it's a 40-year-old car
Mm-hmm.
and possibly not a Porsche. And so when clients come in and clients want to go to Porsche, Ferrari, Mercedes level of celebrity, we've got to be really careful, And one thing I did to expose this, because I like her to see what I see, is I take photographs from the front, the side, and the back of my client with my iPad.
Mm-hmm.
And I put the iPad on her lap next to her, and I let her see what I see.
Mm-hmm.
And that pops the bubble.
Yeah.
Because when a client's 1.5 meters away from the mirror and they're pouting and they're looking at themselves, and
Yeah.
some people, Shallow Hal is my favorite movie of all time.
It is a good movie.
Yeah, and we can really convince ourselves that we're the person on the left.
Yeah. And so
But
doing that through that consultation process at the start,
yes,
so that you're getting on the same page.
yes. And we're talking about where you're at now. Because some clients, I had a client, a fashion designer many years ago, well-known fashion designer, and she kept on bringing a photo when she was 21.
Mm-mm.
And I kept on saying to her, that's great, but that's your past.
Yeah.
We've got to be in the present. We've got to think about the future.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to have those really mature conversations, because otherwise you end up being compared to a past, and you just can't. You absolutely can't, because you don't have the same foundation that the client has in terms of skin, complexion, structure, form that she did when she was 20. So this is really what I think I look like in my mind, as in our perception. And I think the worst thing that we can find as a hairdresser or in beauty is when your client brings in a photo of themselves at an event and they've realized they've got blind spots that have just been popped. So they might see themselves with the photo on the right finally, and go, oh my God, look at your color, what it's doing for my face. And you're like, you got to make sure your ego doesn't come up.
Yeah.
And so this is where you've got to be objective about things. And I like to be really objective from the beginning and not defensive and reactive and judgmental at the end.
Yeah.
And so if we can talk to our client from what we see and what we got to work with, and we love the inspiration of what's going on the left, but that was then. And I don't know if I've shared this because I've been very busy at the moment, but one of the things that I love, Zaha Hadid, best architect in the world, and her firm is just going so strong at the moment. And she passed 5 years ago, and they've got more work in production now than when she was alive. And one of her favorite quotes is, she designs buildings for how she sees the future living, not how the past has lived. And that is one of the most, that's the core essence. When I heard that, I went, that is one of my core essence of my values. Because when a client comes in and a client says to you, I want you to repeat my past, well, you're going to be compared to a lot of different appointments. And that means you're compared to what that client felt like. And there's so many variables in that. Where if you can be innovative and you create something new right now, she has nothing to compare it with.
Yeah.
This is a brand new reset moment with you and your client to reconnect. And that's where I love, for me, that's where the magic happens. That's when your client absolutely becomes awakened, and you're in this world of rejuvenation. And I think that's the space that, when I talk about wellness, that's the space that I like to focus on. I don't like to focus on people's past. That's why I challenge hairdressers in our courses not to do conventional things. So we don't call them a bob. We don't call it layers. We don't call it traditional words. And if you're doing highlights, you don't say full head, half head, T-section, because they're words that are generic. You've got to come up with your own language and your own experience for your client. We have this technique called meshing technique in our cutting. Good luck trying to get a cheap copy of that.
Yeah, not comparable.
Yeah, I'm not comparing myself to 90% of the hairdressing industry. When you think of yourself, when you get up in the morning, I get up to be in the top 10%.
Yes.
And so I don't want to be in a conversation that's the bottom 90%. So our conversation really is focused on, what we get back from our client is really a reflection of what we're asking our client. So we've got to be humble enough to realize, if we're more objective about it, to say, well, actually, I need to learn how to communicate better, more efficiently, more effectively, and with humility, to really open this person's heart to what I'm saying versus closing their mind to what you're saying. So we'll go to the next slide.
Awesome. And I'm just going to do a wee time check here.
Yeah, great.
At 7:50 Australia Eastern Time.
Awesome.
So we've got about 10 more minutes. Hopefully we can.
Awesome. We'll smash it out.
Beautiful.
All right. So projection. Projection is the screen and the projector of everything we do. Projecting yourself with such a strong opinion onto others means you have a dense shadow from pain and trauma. This means that you have someone forcing their opinion onto you. Happens every day of our lives. Walk past someone on the street, they just go bang, their opinion. We can have someone that comes in and say, I really hated that color. Well, they've come back.
Yeah, exactly. Like we were talking about earlier, where they think.
Yeah. So we project ourselves onto others, and as the projection wears off, that person becomes clear. So that only becomes about being present. You can realize that this person's leading from pain and trauma, and all I do is empathize with them, and I've got to make them feel loved, got to make them feel safe. Okay, we'll go to the next slide.
Nice. No, great work.
I know when to pick it up. So the now. So everything we're talking about is about the now. So the now is the exit door out of the ego, because you're present. You can really self-monitor, self-engage, all those things that are coming up, and realize it's a me thing, not a we thing. So we've got to have a lock and key on that mouth. So being at one with what you're doing now helps the energy flow in a very positive way. And that's why I love live, because for me, cutting hair and experience with clients, like a dinner party experience when you're present. It really is. You walk away so enriched that people have shared parts of their life with you because you're contributing to their life in a very positive way. So being present for me is a beginning of freedom. It's more about loosening yourself up to celebrating those moments.
On this as well, you've talked a wee bit today about not looking in the past.
Yeah.
But there's also that other flip side of, the future thinking.
Wow.
What are your views on that? And
really good question.
Yeah.
Really good question. And you want me to finish in 10 minutes? That's so good. That's all good. You just throw that one out there. So that's a really good question. I see them as both the same, because I used to be a really big future thinker. And I realized if I want to chew 2 hours of my day, add that up over a year, and I'm throwing away that time.
Yeah.
And so I want to be more respectful about my time. And I do planning. Like we've just signed off 2021 in terms of our schedule.
Awesome.
And I'm just going to commit to that. And that's how I work now. I'm not going to be sitting there and talking about what ifs. I'm not going to be sitting there talking about things that aren't potentially going to happen. And I'm just going to burn energy and waste energy and potentially give myself anxiety, which is kind of what I used to do when I was younger, is to go into photo shoots thinking, what if this happens? What if that happens? And it never would happen.
It's that future pacing, isn't it? The future pacing that creates that anxiety.
Yeah. And I feel that that also ruminates for anxiety as well. So, you know, if we're working on our breathing and we're focusing on self-kindness and compassion, and like I've got here on your presentation, wiggle your toes, bring it back to stop, to being present and stop thinking, because I think we're in our heads too much. You know, some people are thinking about what they're saying and how it's being perceived. And I don't think like that. I think about when I'm talking about what I'm trying to communicate and what I feel. And I'm ready to hear what the other person has to say. And I can only go on what they're saying. I can't be a mind reader and think what they're not saying. And I really call people out when people try and be the victim and turn around and say, well, I felt like this when you were talking. And you're like, well, you never made me aware of that. And also I can't control how you feel. Because my intention is to make you feel great. And if you're choosing to feel the other way, that's your choice. And so and that's where I really, and I do like, I've had people say to me in the chair, you know, oh, that's a little bit direct. And I said, oh, I hope you can appreciate that. I want you to truly understand how much and how serious I'm taking this appointment. I really want you to feel amazing when you leave.
And it also, you know, not to continue too much, but it also, when you're talking about putting out what you'd like to receive, if you are being direct and transparent and clear with your clients, it opens that door for them to do the same back to you. You're
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And look, your client, instead of sending an email that's that long, your client will think, well, how do I want to be spoken to at 10 o'clock at night? You know, is it that important? And if you've got high levels of rapport with your clients, your client will go, well, I wouldn't want it done to myself. And they'll come in and they'll give you energy. And you just need more people like that. But we've got to become that person first.
Yeah.
I think people are looking for clients like this, but the answer is in the mirror. You've got to become that. And that's, I've learned this lesson many, many times over. We can be victim or we can have ownership. And when you start to have ownership, you start to realize I've got to be the change.
Yeah. Yes, you do. Yes, we do. Yes, I do.
Yeah, we're living our life. We're not talking about our life. We're living our life. And I think that's when you really start to get quite excited about life, because every day is you're contributing to that life in a very positive way. And it's all choice. Everything's a choice. Okay, we'll go to the next slide.
Awesome. There we have it.
Oh, see? There you go. Boom.
Proud of you. Awesome. That is wonderful. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in with us through this presentation. And
I did it.
Yeah, Dario.
Did it. There's 5 minutes to go.
Which is perfect. So thanks so much. And we've had a few awesome comments from people that have joined today, you know, just resonating with what has been shared. So that is amazing. And thank you everyone for joining in on today's
everyone.
Masterclass. It's been brilliant. So we will be back. We will be back next Wednesday for another consultation masterclass, but we are also, Dario and I will be going live on Monday, the 26th of October.
Awesome.
Now, daylight savings will have happened, so just be aware of that. It will be 8 a.m. in the UK, BST, 7 p.m. Australia Eastern Time, and 9 p.m. New Zealand Time. And that is for a one-off cutting seminar.
Yeah.
So very, very excited to go live for that one.
It is amazing, by the way. I just have to say, all the work we're putting into it, it's, I love what I do.
Excited.
Yeah, thank
you.
I
think if you'd like to see a wee sneak peek, actually, on your, is it on your socials, Dario?
Yeah. I'll put it up in about half an hour. I'll put a sneak peek.
Beautiful. Little sneak peek of what's to come there.
Great.
And then next Wednesday, it'll be all about emotions. And so, Dario, I'll let you just give a short little snippet for people to let them know about what emotions will
So really one thing for next week, and each week what we're doing is building the blocks that all contribute to being that change. Emotions for me is it's learning how to self-regulate and manage your emotions. And I'm going to give you some great tools that will help you become much better at not being reactive. And I think that, yeah, it's really exciting. I wish we could do it all at once and just keep doing it. No, it's really great because I'm very passionate about
8 weeks.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about these items because to be a really successful hairdresser, these are really important topics. And I think success for me is getting really connected with yourself, and emotions play a very big part on that, on how we react to the outside world. So can't wait.
Yes, amazing. All right, thanks everyone, and we'll see you soon. Have a lovely day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.